Welcome, Tori Amos.
Hi, Laura.
What a thrill to have you here. The fans are out in force.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. You're the best.
We're all so thrilled about Native Invader. Look at this gorgeous album cover, and we heard a little bit of the music as we were coming in. The album is out now. It's incredible, but it's not the album that you set out to write. You had an idea, and then everything changed. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, yes, I thought it would be a different album, and there you go. The world changed. And I guess for a few weeks, I was sitting there in Florida thinking about where are the muses, what's happening, and then all of a sudden, they started to come like a tsunami, a sonic tsunami. Mm. It was after my mother had had a tragic stroke, and she was under attack, and it seemed as if our Earth Mother, Lady Liberty, America, was also under attack. And that was when the light bulb moment happened, and the songs just dragged me to the Busendorfer, and I didn't leave it for 2 weeks.
This is, I see sort of as your second response album to the state of America. Scarlet's Walk was a post-9/11 album, and this is a post-11/9 album in a way. I love the intersection between the state of the union, the country, and the world, and your personal roots. I love reading the stories about your grandfather, your papa, and how his story is interwoven into this album. Can you talk about him and your memories of him as they're related to the songs on the album?
He was the type of person that could, he'd light his pipe, and he'd talk about what happened on his way to get butter at the country butter shop in Newton, North Carolina. And you could not stop listening to him. I was enthralled. I didn't want to go in and see, what is it, the Lawrence Welk show that Nanny would be watching, or any of the other shows that were happening, or even, I love the Beatles, but even find my brother wherever he was with his cousins listening to the Beatles across town. And it was a small town in North Carolina. But I wanted to listen to this amazing storyteller weave his stories. And so that's what propelled me to go to the Smoky Mountains in July 2016 to try and be around what he had been around, even though he'd been in towns and small cities and he'd been working in the mills since he was very young. But I just wanted to be around the nature, hoping that I would be getting some songs. And no songs were coming in July 2016. But I think the seeds were being planted. That's when they did come. They had been, brewing and taking in everything that was going on in the country.
There's a story in your book, Piece by Piece, about how when you were a little girl, he used to take you out and say, listen to the earth. There are stories there, and if you find the right spot, the song will come out of the earth. And I know you've also talked about the songs coming out of the sky and you being a receptor for them, someone who listens. Do you feel like that trip was you sort of searching for those holes in the sky and holes in the earth, like the ones you describe in that book?
I think so, but I also think that trip was about silence, quiet, listening to just the streams running. Johnny and I got lost because we ended up on a back road. That was a one lane. It was a service road. And my goodness, when there are no rails and you're going up those ridges, and you think for a minute, oh, look, we're riding the ridges like they say you can do in the travel book. And then you're thinking, Johnny's looking at me saying, we're doing more than riding the ridges. And then we get to the very top, hoping no truck comes the other way because there's literally no place to go. And we got to the top, and we sat there and thought, oh my goodness, this could be 200-300 years ago, because there was nothing except trees, nothing. And in that moment, it got misty in my eyes because I started to imagine the great indigenous nations that had been there hundreds of years ago. And those stories. and that they were in the land, the song lines were there. And so I knew they were there, but I couldn't quite tap into them yet. So the guidance was, then be still. Don't make any noise. Just be still. And I was still with it for 45 minutes. And I do believe that once the song started coming, it was that sort of meditative moment of asking permission to hold the future songs and almost making a commitment to do whatever it took to hold their energy.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a meditation practice?
No.
Your music is your meditation. I'm picturing you driving up this one-lane road in the mountains. What kind of vehicle do you use? Like, are you just like driving along? Do you have a driver?
In the Smokies, Johnny was driving, and we were in a four-wheel drive. But I have an FJ Cruiser that I wear with high heels.
That's so fantastic and exactly what I want for you. I love the picture of you just out there kind of roughing it in your four-wheel drive. I want to also talk to you about being a parent. Your daughter makes a guest appearance on this album as she's done before. Tosh has such a beautiful voice, and I also hear her voice on the songs where she doesn't sing. I can tell that you've been influenced as an artist by being a parent, and I am especially fascinated by the fact that Tosh is now the age that so many of us were when we discovered your music, and I can speak for myself as a longtime fan that there is something about being a teenager and finding an artist and the tunes that move you that can really feel like it literally or figuratively saves one's life. How has having a teenager in your household informed you as an artist and informed your own understanding of your relationship with your fans?
Wow. Okay. So, all right. I'm aware of what shows are coming up in ways that I would not know. Their culture, the teenage culture, of course, I would have no idea. Because unless you're tapped into that, you just don't know. So being tapped into it's one thing and being exposed. And it's quite something that she'll confide in me and her dad. We hold that really sacred because she'll say some of her friends, when their parents go away, their parents have no idea what they're up to. Mm-hmm. And we said, her father's always said to her, look, just no fibs. Whatever you get into, you can call me. And so she calls from Amsterdam this summer and calls her dad. And I said, so is she going to see the Van Gogh Museum? And he said, well, they stood in line. I said, oh, good. So are they in yet? Uh-huh. He said, wife, they're getting baked.
Well, she's not fibbing. Has she ever tried to use your music against you and being like, well, Mom, in this lyric on that album, you said?
Well, she said, funny, I guess we are genetically connected because magic mushrooms, Mom. I went, what else did you do in Amsterdam? She says, a lot of pot noodle.
Oh, amazing. Well, I actually, as you may have guessed, I went back and reread your book before doing this interview, and the intro really cracked me up because you dedicate it to her and you say, I hope she doesn't read this book before she's 16. But didn't she just turn 17 this September?
She did turn 17.
Is she allowed to read the book now?
Yeah, I think she's allowed to read the book, but we have discussions about things, which is great. She did tell me, though, before the Albert Hall, her friends were coming. She had friends that had never been part because she was at a new school. She's in this thing called sixth form in England. Mm-hmm. And so she goes to me, okay, it's all going to be good. I said, yeah, it's going to be good. I think it'll be fine. But it's the Albert Hall, so that's one of those places. I had a terrible rehearsal. It just wasn't coming together. And I thought, right. When I went back in there, I looked at self and said, okay, Mom, you need to stay back here. Wife, you need to stay back here. Muses, let's go.
Yeah, rock star, you're getting
Well,
out there.
Songs, let's go. Come on, the songs. And Karen Benz walks in, my friend from 25 years from Brooklyn, who lives in London. She goes, I want to see it be brought.
And I bet it was brought.
Well, Taj comes backstage and she brings her friends, and there were a couple boys there, and they just looked and said, "You rocked." And Taj just went, "Thank you, mother."
Is your song selection for the shows on this tour going to be any different than it has been on the past tours? I know you've talked a lot about getting into the space and feeling the energy of the audience and listening to the muses. Is it the same with this? Are you pulling from all eras of your career, or are you just playing songs from Native Invader?
Native Invader is very produced, so doing that in a one-woman show is challenging, but I'm working on it still. I need to hurry up. But I also think that what's going on in the world, we have to respond to that. We have to respond with song choices and string a narrative together and work together every night collaboratively. The audience is so much a part of the show because they're holding energy and we're moving energy around. And I think that's essential with all the tragedies that we're hearing from California fires and people losing their homes. There have been people that were out in Europe that were racing back to Oregon to see the damage to their home and their life. And then, of course, the sexual assault that continues to be exposed in all industries. And we are going to address that because it's important that we're sharing, yes, our stories, but we're also planting seeds to potentially make those changes that need to be made in every city. Yeah. But it takes a group. It takes a group. So when energy comes together, more than one, 10, 20, 100, 1,000, and together, we can move it.
Yeah. You've taken requests for as long as I've been aware of your music, and that's been a long time. It used to be that people would wait at the stage door or leave notes with venues. Are you taking requests via social media at all? I know you're on Instagram, you're on Twitter. Are you in touch with your fans that way in terms of what shapes the set lists?
We still do the stage door because there's something about meeting people face to face and talking to them and listening. And sometimes there's not a lot of time, which I regret because I'm racing to sound check because that's where the show gets built. And it really does get built every day in every city. There's some songs that are coming more than others on this tour, but some of that is because it takes time to build the repertoire. However, people give me their observations and they'll say, "Do you know this is going on?" And usually I'll say, "I had no idea. I didn't know that was going on." Just because you can't know what's going on everywhere.
Right.
And that's where the network really works, because then the show can be very much tailored that night to issues that are happening, possibly in that city and that day.
I'm glad that you brought up the resurgence of awareness of the sexual assaults that are happening, the number of women and non-binary people and trans people and men too who are talking about how much this has been pervasive throughout the culture of entertainment in all industries. You very early on in 1991, you wrote and started performing this beautiful a cappella song called Me and a Gun. And you also created RAIN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. I think that it would be, I want to take the opportunity of being in front of these cameras to remind people that RAIN is out there and donations are needed and that we are still fighting this epidemic. And I want to acknowledge you as someone who spoke out bravely when very few people were doing so. And you were involved in an independent film about sexual assault a couple of years ago. And this isn't really a question except a thank you.
Well, RAIN has received more calls in the last week. The numbers have gone up. hugely, and they've had to call on resources because it isn't going away. And it's something that we need to also just really be aware that when Audrey and Daisy came out, and it was explained to me that this was now not only in our high schools, but in our middle schools, that it's not a surprise that it's in Hollywood and in Washington, but that it's in our middle schools, well, then we have to trace it back to the root. We have to tackle it with the grown-ups. And we have to come forward and realize that if we've looked the other way, or if we were afraid to speak up when we were seeing it in the office, well, now is the time to make the change. And so, yes, there's grieving going on, and there's a process of grief, as we know. The scabs are off with some people because they are. And so there's pain and there's anger and there are all these things. But to really make a change, that's a continued conversation. And that is about boundaries getting put in place in the workplace. And that's about, even if we have some of those pervs still on boards or at the top of the food chain, because there will be pervs that will still get those big jobs, that there is a protocol in place of how to behave, and we accept nothing less, or they get called out.
Yeah.
There are consequences to acting out on that behavior.
Certainly having art as an outlet, both to feel understood and also to distract, to bring us joy in the times when we need that escape, is so important. And I think there's so much of all of that on Native Invader. There are the songs that reach in and grip you by the heart and go like, yes, I know, and you just have to sob about it. And then there's like an ode to chocolate that's just, which I know is about more than just chocolate, but it's like, yeah, you know, sometimes you just have to get a good dark bar of chocolate and sing about it.
In between throwing knives at husband.
It sounds like there's a story there.
We're still married.
What's your chocolate of choice?
Dark. Very dark.
Any dark chocolate.
Well, that's Swiss truffles. Okay. Yeah.
You taking
great.
notes, people? Go to the stage door?
Yeah, but that's tricky that we're here. Because green and blacks will do in a pinch, though.
Okay, good to know. What else are you doing while you're in New York? I know you're doing a lot of press for the album. Are you seeing any shows? I know you're a theater fan.
Yeah, big theater fan, but no time this time. I think the whole focus is getting ready for the tour, doing all the press that we've committed to do. And we fly out Saturday to get ready, start rehearsals in Minnie, town of one of the great musicians that has ever lived, Prince. And when he came to see me on the American Doll Posse tour, and he was running backstage from side to side, and I think, will I just break down in tears when I remember meeting him and thinking, wow, seeing Purple Rain is the reason that changed my life. It changed my life.
So you know what it's like when people come up to you and say, you changed my life. You as an artist changed my life. Because you've had your life changed by artists as well. Well,
you hold it very dear. And when I told him that, he twinkled. And so it's bittersweet going and playing Minneapolis St. Paul because so many of our great musicians have left the planet in the last couple years. Too many to mention, so many who have been influential, that I want to honor him, though.
Yeah. Well, I've heard you play Purple Rain live, and it is, it's an experience. And I know that you just played a tribute to Tom Petty the other night on stage, and you've always been so wonderful about acknowledging those powerhouses, that some of whom are still with us and some of whom are not. I think that's a really beautiful thing that you do. I'll never forget one of the first recordings I think I ever heard of you, that was probably illegally procured, was when you did a tribute to Kurt Cobain right after he passed away all those years ago.
We were in Ireland, And I'll never forget it because I think we were in a boxing arena. I can't remember what it's called. It wasn't an arena size. And I started to play it with American Pie. Yeah. And all of a sudden, the Irish, of all places, in perfect pitch, of course, you're with the Irish, and they're singing the whole thing with me, almost in a prayer. A whole group of people that were praying for him, but for them because they'd lost such a great musician.
Yeah. It feels like that prayer has never stopped. And every time I've seen you live, which is a lot of times, I feel like that prayer continues, and you manage to somehow be like the religious icon and also the sister at the same time, and that's a really rare and special thing.
Well, hopefully, with all the shows, I'm going to get the requests moving because I'm backed up on my requests. Glory of the 80s.
Well, I'm going to just say I'd love to hear something from the Light Princess on tour. So consider my request. Consider my request in, but also, no pressure.
Okay.
We have time for.
And what shows are you going to be at, Laura? New York.
Oh, the Broadway shows that I'm going to.
No.
Oh, your shows. I'm going to all of them. There's 2 Beacon Theater shows. Back to back on November 8th and 7th and 8th. Yeah, I'll be at those ones. So add in Light Princess.
Noted.
We have time for a couple of questions from the audience. Who has a question?
Hey, hi. I know, I surprised you over here. First of all, looking fierce, girl. Like,
thank
you know,
Karen
we
Benz.
love the shoes.
Thank you.
Anyway,
Chloe Goslin.
I'm gonna meet her. I had a question about bats, which, first of all, amazing.
You mean the song, not the animal, right?
Well, no, well, right. Bats are amazing, but also the song. It's captivating, and when it comes to you on the album, it just sort of, it hits, and stunning song amongst many. Oh, you're welcome. You knew that. Anyway, my question is. It seems that the metaphor of bats mixed with the ocean, and what the bats mean, because it seemed to me that the bats represent our earth and air selves, and you're talking about the oceans with the mythology of I'm going to say the word wrong, you'll correct me, the endives, right, of the sea. And I was wondering how, what the bats sort of represented in the mythology of the song.
Well, I don't know what was in my tea when I was writing this song. But again, there are times when altered states do take over. And I'd been working on the idea of these creatures coming out of the sea and the undines, and that there had been a pact made with humanity a long time ago, a long time ago, that humans have forgotten about. Perhaps they've forgotten about it consciously, and then at first, and now they don't remember. So the bats were something that kind of surrounded me and wanted to be the wise ones in the story. And I was reading a lot of mythology at the time. There was a book, Robert Graves, The Greek Myths, and that was really cornerstone for the record. That one and some Joseph Campbell books, mythological books there, that were reminding me about the different myths over the last couple thousand years. And Sapiens, what a great book.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that we could do a whole extra half hour just on that book. I co-sign that recommendation. You have a question?
Hi. So you had a graphic novel anthology comic book tattoo that came out a little while back. Did you work with the artists on the book, and would you do another volume of that?
I loved doing that. Rance Hosley was editor on that book, and he brought all these amazing artists and storytellers talking about the songs. And Rance is working with us on something that is, it's hard to explain. You'll know on the first night of Minneapolis St. Paul what it is he's been working on with us. But I knew him since he entered Parsons as a teenager. And I met him through a gal that I had babysat for, if you can believe that. And they were friends. And he's the one that turned me on to Neil Gaiman and his writing. And so, to answer your question, I'd love to do another volume. It's not in the works, but working on that with a visual artist was incredible for me.
Do we have another question?
Hi, Tori.
Hi.
Thank you for everything. So as a longtime fan, I've connected with a lot of other fans, and it seems like we all have really intense, emotional, and deep connections with you and your music. And I'm curious, you know, you've seen that we all tend to want to hug and tend to cry when we meet you. And it never stops. With every album, the connection just grows deeper and deeper. And I'm curious what your emotional response is to that, especially, I mean, it's been 30 years now, and does it ever get to be too much? Does it ever get old? I mean, you're just one woman just making music. Is it ever overwhelming to you? And thank you.
Well, when you asked me about meditation, that's a little misleading, my answer, because I think there's something that is important to share, which is I take time to be grounded before I listen to somebody's story, because it's very sacred. And I know that there's a time pressure sometimes too, which can create a hidden anxiety. So I'm holding a space for as much calm as possible and hoping for letters, because I read the letters on the bus. And that's when I'm able to then hear what somebody is wanting to share. That's how I learn a lot about what you all are thinking and what you're experiencing, and what I don't like the word show, what the evening could be. And even though I might have read it, the letters are from Minnie St. Paul, and I'm reading them on the way to Wisconsin and Chicago, and the effects of that letter doesn't come out until Chicago, I still think, okay, that's okay. It's a little late, but I was born 2 weeks late, so we'll get there. But it is about grounding, to be able to hear and contain, really. It's about containing those messages and stories that are being sacredly given, and I take it very seriously.
Has anyone in this room written Tori a letter ever?
Yay, I read them.
I've kept copies of some of the letters that I wrote you 20 years ago, and they're really something. And I think in at least one of them I said, I just want to sit in a room and talk to you. So this is very full circle for me.
Have you told them that you ran away from home when you were, 15, 16 years old to jump on tour?
Well, I didn't quite run away from home, but I did cut high school to go and be in the studio audience of a radio station interview in San Francisco. And I think my dad bribed the producers to let me come in because it was full. I mean, we could do a whole book about my experiences as a Tori fangirl. So I am here for you, Ears with Feet. I am doing this for all of us today. Let's take one more question and then we'll wrap up. Or one or two more.
Hi, Tori.
Hi.
First, I want to say thank you because your music helped me get through chemotherapy last year when I was fighting breast cancer. My question for you is this. I teach high school English literature, and when I go into a text with my students, not only do we look at the characters and the plot, but I love the language. And I want to find out what pushed the writer to give us this gift. And I tell my students that it's the artist's responsibility to comment on the social and political climate at the time. So after the election, I know we were all going through a bunch of emotions, sure you were as well, do you feel when you start writing, is this an emotional catharsis or a responsibility or a combination of both?
Well, I was going through things as well, and then I was hearing stories from people themselves, and also from people through other people. And at a certain point, I was getting a message from the collaborators, who I call the muses. They said to me, look, you've got to shift, because what's coming is not working with where you are. You're in a place of reaction and anger, and this is not going to work. You're not writing Boys for Pele. You've done that, and maybe some of this energy could have worked for that, but that's not what's coming. This is a sonic wildwood where people can step in wherever they are and pick in if they need resilience, if they need a clear stream, if they need a magic mushroom, whatever they need to get through the day. This is what we're sonically giving, but you have to shift, because you will not. How do you think you're going to combat this? This kind of bullying, accusatory, pointing finger energy. How are you going to do that? By beating them at their own game? You don't know how to do that. That's not in your wheelhouse. You might think it is, but it is not. You will be destroyed. So go create. And out-create them, as they always say. But they said, we're serious about this. We're really, really serious. And then I didn't hear anything from them for a couple weeks. Like, aren't I shifting fast enough? So, but eventually when the songs started to come, they started to come, and they didn't stop until it was written. It was written very quickly, after waiting for a long, long, long time.
And it's so right. These songs, thank goodness you waited for the right ones to come, because this album is a masterpiece. Native Invader, Tori Amos, out now. I'm thrilled that we got to spend this time with you, and we're all going to go buy the album and listen to it 100 times on repeat, and then go see you on tour.
Thanks, everybody. You're the
Thanks,
best.
Tori.
You're the best.